What if the real problem with modern dating isn't a lack of love, but a loss of order? Welcome to Black Love Dialogue and Wine, a private podcast experience for those serious about love, marriage, and legacy. This isn't surface level romance. These are intentional conversations reclaiming the strongest love ever known, Black love. In today's dating culture, we've normalized trauma bonding and calling it commitment. We've romanticized love while forgetting marriage was built for legacy before feelings. At Black Love Dialogue, we restore balance, honoring love and structure, emotion and purpose. If you're seeking love, strengthening it, or preparing for marriage, this private experience gives you the mindset and resources to build lasting pair bonds. This private Zoom takes place 8 p.m. Eastern, last Sundays of the month. So get your tickets on eventbrite.com and bring your flash so we can toast and deep dive into legacy before love, featuring therapists Micaiah Dominguez, Marilyn Odwini, mental health advocate Chris James, and award-winning relationship coaches Fila Antwine, Derek Sincere Clark, and Vaughn the Love Alchemist with over 35 years of marriage. What's up, Queen? How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Good to see you. Happy to be here as always.
Hey, good stuff. Hey, we're just doing a recap because, we do a private podcast. So this is not what we actually do is not for the public, but we wanted to give them a little recap of how well it went. Actually, we're going to do fourth Sundays. I know the promo says last Sundays, but actually going to do every fourth Sunday just for clarity, because I think this month has five Sundays. So I definitely want to make sure I get that clear and out there. But you are one of our co-hosts, if you will, for the Black Love Dialogue and Wine private podcast experience. We did have it Sunday night. Decent turnout, real deep dive into this thing we call Black Love. For those serious about love, marriage, and legacy. And so, Queen, if you will, introduce yourself as we do this recap and have an extension of the discussion we had Sunday night, just to kind of show people in the public what we're doing with these deep dives. But thank you for being with us. Tell them who you are.
Of course. It's always a pleasure, Montoya. Every single time it is a vibe. My name is Fila Antwine. I'm an award-winning life, love, and relationship coach, specifically centered around helping Black women elevate into grown woman love that allows them to feel safe, soft, and be seen in relationships. And what I do is I help women prioritize relationship building as a life skill, not just as a goal to chase. So in the Queendom, which is where I coach my clients, we really elevate our love identity and perspective, and we bring the healing in the room so that Black men and women can live and love together in harmony.
And you do it oh so well. One of somebody that was at the podcast said, "Hey, they loved it." So we already got some comments.
Yes.
I got some amazing feedback. I think I sent some to you as well. Sister, I consider my sister.
Absolutely, same.
Yeah, she said that her and her husband had one of the deepest conversations they ever had. That was just, she sent me that via text, and I talked to her today because I was going to invite her on. I forgot to invite her, but when I talked to her, she was like, "You don't understand. It went deeper than you would ever think." She was like, "We did a lot of healing just off of one podcast with us."
That's amazing, because that's the goal. That's the point of all of this.
Yeah. We're not playing around. That's why it's private. We're not recording. So that's what the recap is. That's us talking about it, because to be a part of it, you have to join the actual podcast. But we'll let people know how to do that. Let me just share with you a little more feedback we got. And this is just kind of the general feedback from the surveys.
Okay.
Like 73%. We got a 73% 4 or 5 rating. 83%. And then I asked how likely are you to attend again, and we got 4.83 out of 5. Like, so basically everybody saying they would come back. How likely are you to vote others? 4.58 out of 5. Was this podcast worth it? We got 92% on that. So everybody felt again.
Yes.
Like I say, it's a minimum charge to me, $25 to get access to what y'all do. And like I said, my bigger goal is that people actually get into some of y'all programs, because not only do we have you, but all the other ones that were highlighted in the intro, everybody we bring on are professionals. I'm just the moderator, but we brought on professionals who are all married. I think that is key to coming to this private podcast experience to have these discussions. It's not theory. It's people with experience who are also coaching others, whether through mental health, whether through relationship coaching and various means. That's the difference, and that shows how serious we are for our group. So I love the responses we've got from the surveys, the actual feedback. But I think having married relationship coaches, married therapists is key. Your thoughts on that, and then we're going to play a clip and just let people get actual idea of what we're actually doing as a part of this private podcast. But what's your thoughts on, all of our therapists are married, all of our coaches are married?
Well, I do believe that anyone can contribute to a conversation, right? But it's important that you have people who have actually lived the experience in the room so that we can all speak to our own lived experiences, the things that we've been through, and that we can be a community of mentorship for those who actually want to be here. It's interesting because I had a conversation with my 13-year-old daughter yesterday, and I had to remind her, I said, baby, the internet is not real life, honey bun. Okay. So this is what you're seeing online, but is that what you're experiencing in your real life? And so having married couples who are actually living in marriage, living in partnership is really important to the single folks who only get their perspective from bitter baby mamas and deadbeat dads on the internet.
Yeah, unfortunately. And what I always say, and this is what I think makes it more, what we're doing a real deep dive is you actually can get good information on the internet. It's not that you don't get good information, but what happens is because we are a microwave society and you're getting it in such a short view, like a clip we're about to play is like 3 or 4 minutes. The 3 or 4 minutes, the information, I'm not saying this clip that we're playing is exactly right, but I'm just highlighting that you can get good information on the internet, but
Absolutely.
it's the context that's lacking. And so that's where we get to take it further for those that are watching. We find these clips and use them as part of our feedback. We're also, using the Inner Work of Relationships book as one of our foundations as well. But the biggest thing, people could ask y'all questions. So I'm looking forward to this month's Black Love Dialogue and Wine experience, a private podcast experience. But with that said,
and I think because the algorithms, the algorithms prioritize the drama. And those people who are looking for real conversations, healthy conversations, are not going to find that in those specific places. So coming into this private space is where you get to actually build with people who are not just trying to feed the algorithm.
No, absolutely. That's a good point. So again, for anybody watching, this is a clip we actually played on the last Sunday, was it January the 28th? We played on our last private podcast experience, and it created some dialogue. We went into it to a degree, but you and I felt like there was some areas we could go a little deeper in, and so we want to do some of that here. So everybody watching, you're gonna watch this clip. This is from Jordan Peterson and his wife. I found this clip from Better Love Movement, Anita, over at IG. So definitely look for Better Love Movement. This sister always put out great content. I stole it from her. And it's Jordan Peterson and his wife talking about the power of no. And as I labeled this one, should women learn how to say no again? And I will emphasize how, not necessarily the no, but the how. But anyway, let me play this clip and then we'll respond to it and get out of here. All right.
I will tell you that both of them got a lot of attention from guys. Most of the guys were not worthy of a lot of their time and attention. But I will say that there were a few times where they said no. I mean, and I'm not talking about to a major sexual advance. I'm just saying, no, you can't have my attention. No, I won't be your girlfriend. No, I won't continue to be your girlfriend if you continue to do these kinds of things. And then they watch the men, the young men, the 16-year-old, the 17-year-old reform because the girl has something they want, even if it's just attention, even if it's just saying she is my girlfriend.
Well, there's nothing about attention. There's nothing but attention, right? Attention is everything. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I just think that, my daughters have seen the incredible power of no.
Yeah.
And I will tell young girls, because I've been involved in youth ministry for decades. I was running the youth ministry at our church until about a year ago. And I tell girls, like, if there's a guy that you really like, and if you want him to pursue you, you say no to pretty much everything. No, I won't hold your hand. No, I mean, be kind, right? Yeah, you can go on a date, but if it has to do with a physical advance, the more you say no, the more your desirability goes up. If you want him to move on, give him what he wants physically. So
No,
once
give him
girls
what his
figure out the
whims
power
want.
of no.
Give him what his whims
Yes,
want.
that's right.
Right. Because
Yeah.
you're serving the lowest part of him. Right. And I don't mean that,
Yes,
I don't
that's
mean
right.
that in some sexually prudish element. I'm saying that sexual desire itself is a short-term gratification seeking mechanism, so to speak. And it has to be integrated into a personality that's forward-looking and future-oriented and social. And if the relationship degenerates to the immediately sexual, then it serves no one's medium to long-term interests, and certainly not society's interests, certainly not children's interests, not least because it tends to culminate in abortion.
That's right. Yep, that's exactly right. Kids lose. Anytime sex is happening outside of long-term committed heterosexual permanent unions, kids will always pay the price for that. I think that that's one of the reasons why we are where we are in terms of marriage and family, is we have pretended like there's no cost. But there is a cost. There's always a cost to kids. We've said if the adults are happy, the kids will be happy. We've said biology doesn't matter. Love makes a family. But that's not true. Somebody is always going to pay the price. It's just the kids who pay it because they can't defend their own rights.
I think this is a powerful clip, right? And we played it at the Black Love Dialogue experience. And you said something that was real key. I hope I can trigger you and remind you of this. And I was surprised at what you said, but it was so key when you said it. And so when the clip finished, I mean, some people had said some things, and then when you piped in, some people said some things, and then when you piped in, you wanted to highlight specifically for Black women's experience, there was this idea of actually saying no to too much. And so I just wanted to kind of leave it and let you say it. But I just remember when you kind of mentioned it, and I thought it was unique and necessary, and it made sense. So if you could just kind of highlight that thought again, because again, I thought it was critical to this very conversation. While I actually personally agree with a lot of what they said, I still think where you went was necessary inside of our conversation. So if you can, Queen, just kind of recap.
Of course. So I think the conversation that we just viewed was valuable, right? There was a lot of nuance in it, and there's a lot of information. As Black people, we always have to look at things, like you said, in the context of who we are and how we need to operate. And so when it comes to Black women, because this is who I predominantly work with, Black women have learned to say no too often and too much, as a safety mechanism, as a self-protective mechanism, right? As this safeguard in their lives. And so there's often a barrier, and Black women will just say no so much that they don't know when to use no as an actual resource, which is what I think you're talking about, how to say no, right? When to say no as a way to be exclusive and to create barriers to access that you want a men to earn and elevate into. But what I experience with my clients is that they are self-sufficient, they are educated, they are successful, they have their own homes, their own money, so they don't need to say yes. And so no just becomes an automatic response, which then blocks the men who want to have an actual relationship, blocks the opportunities that are actually going to be beneficial and good for them. And it even blocks the emotional wellness and the mental healing to a certain extent. So what I'm saying is that Black women in particular have to examine their no more than other women, learn to say no as a resource and a barrier to access, so that you are able to be exclusive and to sift through who you really need to say yes to. Does that make sense?
No, I love it. It's actually perfect because and I'll highlight what I think I understand just to make sure that your messaging is get across. But what I'm hearing is I would say the most toxic version of what you're talking about, and I doubt you work with these type of women, but I'll just kind of say the most toxic version of it is even like the mean girl stuff, right?
Right.
That's the toxic version of the no to everything type thing or whatever. And again, I doubt that's the type of women that are approaching you. But to your point, the reality of, again, you're working with these dynamic women who have done well and checked a lot of boxes, if you will. Part of them staying focused probably has been part of the reason. But the additional part is, like you said, now when it's like, look around, let me complete this with someone in my life. During that period, they've gotten used to not dealing with knuckleheads. They've done maybe a little better. They haven't gotten off track per se, or maybe it happened once. Or we also talked about this that night. You talked about that Psalm that you run with have actually had some trauma as well. So they have the toughest time with what to say yes and no to, due to maybe some traumatic experience, or I'll say semi-traumatic experience, meaning that they necessarily hadn't been through, an actual violent situation, but some fearful situations. And so at that point, the no pops up in a way that actually doesn't allow even a good brother in. And I think that's what you're referring to, of saying the context of us understanding, okay, how do you identify and use no properly to even still, say, smile at that brother when the correct brother approaches you. Like little small things like that is what I think I'm hearing, but let me know if I got what you're putting down.
Yes, that's it. That's what we're talking about and where we are. And also using the no as a resource, as a vetting tool, so to speak, right? So being able to consciously say no to the things that are not aligned with what you want, and potentially saying yes less, but not just saying no all the time. And I also think what we talked about that night also was the difference this conversation plays in the lives of women and men, and then in the lives of boys and girls, right?
About to go there. Absolutely about to go there next, because here's where I find value in what Jordan Peterson and his wife was talking about. Because what I recall when we played the clip that night, and we didn't deep dive because we had other things to get into, but I recall, because another thing for anybody watching, if you're a part of the private podcast, it's not like you're doing now. You're not just watching the two of us, right? It's literally all of us are participating on a private Zoom. So when we played the clip, there were people responding saying, I don't know about that. And again, we're not saying that they're right. We do it to have the dialogues, right? And so I remember that night, one of the things that popped up, I wasn't surprised to see this, but one of the things that popped up was people were quick to start saying, hey, let's teach the boys to say no too. You know what I mean? Like that was one of the first things that kind of popped up, which is very common in current times. And it was like, hey, and one couple talked about raising their boys to, to value themselves, which I absolutely applaud that. Black boys, black men need to know how to value themselves and not just give their bodies away either, right? But it moved directly into that conversation, right? When they saw Jordan Peterson and, saying, hey, him and his wife were saying, hey, his wife was saying, say no to everything. And it was just like, hey, it was kind of like leaning into what they were talking about, that being prude and saying, hey, that ain't cool. It ain't cool to be judging women in that way. Like that conversation came out. And what I always thought was key in that clip was when she was saying no, Jordan Peterson jumped in a little bit and said, say no to his whims. That was critical, because it did sound like she was just, because she did say no basically to everything. So I get that when people hear that, they're hearing it just as that. But Jordan Peterson jumped in to say no to his whims. And he went on to explain the whims being, in a sense, that lower value, instant gratification type stuff that when we're younger or even older and immature, or naturally you walk by looking great, looking fine, and maybe that's the first thing on the mind. I'm just keeping it a bean, right? And so saying no to those initial whims will actually garner some respect. So that's where I wanted to go with this conversation, to get into the how to say no. And I would go as far as in 2026, even that the culture's missing that altogether. I'm talking about just in general. We talk about the dating pool, it's got P in it. Part of it is this skill set that actually gives, in my opinion, a woman a lot of power. But the fear that you're talking about and the traumatized stuff that has actually happened to some of our sisters, so I'm not denying any of that, but due to those realities, we've lost the art, in my opinion, of having no be properly placed so that our women actually can be protected. I'm not talking about protected on some, the men should understand. And I'm not talking about that typical conversation. I'm just talking about the value of how we as men actually are surprised when you say no. And that surprise actually leads to, oh, I got to look at her different. And the start of that is going to let you sift through, as you were mentioning earlier, sift through those who are immature or in their extended adolescence, as I often talk about on Mental Dialogue. So I know I'm kind of rambling here, but I'm going to let you kind of jump in and let's massage through this conversation, because I think the proper no's are missing, especially for our young women today.
So, this is one of my favorite conversations to have, because it leads us into the art of sensuality and the art of seduction, right? And one of the major points of being a woman who is able to seduce a man or seduce life or seduce anything is having the self-discipline to be able to say no the first time, because it does get the wheels turning. It does make someone who's interested think, well, what is it that I have to do in order to get her to say yes? And so now there's this interest on both sides, right? It's not just about that instant sexual gratification or that instant attention or connection. It forces each of us to go underneath. And one of the most sexiest attributes of a man is his self-discipline. Right? This is why single women find married men so attractive, because married men, if they are operating in the perspective of being married, they're different from the rest of the men out here. They're not jumping at everything. They're not saying yes. And so that is very sexy. It's very attractive. And so when I'm working with my clients and they're like, I would love to really have more men attracted to me, the conversation does lean into, well, what have you been saying yes to in the past? And where do you need to say no now? So it's such an important conversation, not just to get a man to like you or gain a man's attention, but to develop a level of self-discipline that then leads to a deeper connection of both of us now, because now we're interested in each other. Now we want to know more. Now we get to play this like sexy, sensual, seductive game of figuring each other out deeper under the surface. And I think what I hear you saying is that maybe sometimes men need that, right? Need the no in order to even figure out what it is that they want, what you guys are attracted to, where you really want to go in this space. But people are so afraid of losing out on the attention and the instant gratification that they can't hold out long enough to even figure out where they want to go with this thing and what they want to do with it.
Yep. And JP and his wife talked about it. The attention is everything. That's why social media works so well. So basically all you and I are saying right now is be aware of falling for the dopamine hit of attention, which happens absolutely in reality when you meet that person. And yes, there are plenty of young boys, even grown men, and again, extended adolescent. I was guilty of living it too. So I'm not talking from a place of, I'm talking from having done this stuff. Some of this stuff. Not all of it. I'm not a predator or anything like that. But I'm just talking about just the idea of just still maturing into what do I actually want. And so before I mature into that period, let me use me as an example versus all men. Let me talk from an I space. So what happens is that literally you are surprised when a woman says no in the day's time. I'm 52. And then when I taught, I did after school program for 7 years. So I still interact with youth and hearing what it's like for them. And I remember doing a mental dialogue show where I was trying to bring in this young man. I don't think he wasn't able to make it on the show, but he was just telling me how it is now. I remember what it was like for me coming up in my teens and my 20s and 30s. And he had his perspective was, I don't know if I'll ever get married, because he was so used to just, he was an athletic guy, handle his business. And so access was so easy. He felt like he couldn't trust nothing. That's his lead in. I went through a period of that myself. Like I had to mature past my complete distrust due to the period of extended adolescence where access was so easy. So I had to reverse out of that. And while, I'm still single and looking to be married, but I highlighted and did a show talking about my 10-year extended period of adolescence and what I learned from it. Because basically, like, I was hurting myself because the distrust came from yes was said so easy to so many things. Or as I matured away from that and started having my own self-discipline, then I also started running into your clients. Now I'm mature enough. You feel me? I've always had a level of self-discipline. So I wasn't just wilding out there. I'm not trying to, correct everything, but I'm just saying I've always had some level of self-discipline. But when they really matured into it, I'm saying, okay, now I'm actually looking for a wife. Now the reality is, this is not I'm not pointing a finger thing. I'm talking about the reality of figuring this out in my early 40s. And at this stage, having women who, as I always point out, y'all have been in the workforce with men for longer than any other generation of women ever, right? Like before getting married, right? I'm saying y'all have been in the work. So what happens is, so when I'm looking for that mature sister, her life experiences has her saying no to everything.
Yep.
Quite understandable. So I'm not pointing a finger. I'm just talking about the reality of how it can play out. I get past my extended adolescence. I'm looking for something real. And now her reality is saying no. Sometimes, and I did run into some sisters who's had very traumatic situations. And again, I know you work with those type of women, so it's understandable that they're saying no. But maybe this is the time to say, highlight, what do you say to someone you've had an experience? You always let us know that. So what is the conversation for someone who may be watching that had a traumatic experience? What does saying yes look like? Even though we focus on the no, what does yes saying look like? How do you even start that process for someone who's actually had a traumatic situation?
Yeah. So, when we talk about intimacy and there has been some intimate or sexual trauma in some way, that yes first starts with yourself, right? You have to say yes to wanting to create a sense of normalcy around relationships, a sense of safety around connection and partnership. And so women who have had any type of intimate traumatic experience are always going to be looking at everything that comes after that through that trauma lens. That's what you have to understand first, so that you can say, oh, okay, I recognize that, but yes, I do want a healthy relationship. Yes, I do want a healthy partnership. Yes, I do want to be married and have children and feel comfortable and safe in my relationship. So how do I get there? And that actually does require support, some type of support system, some type of intentional and consistent internal dialogue that's happening. And most often it requires therapy or life coaching, so that you have someone who can help you become aware of the things that have been implanted by that traumatic experience, so that you can unlearn those behaviors, unlearn those patterns, and then rethink the thoughts that have put you in a path of simply operating from the trauma. And that's not easy to do, which is why it's necessary to do outside of the dating and relationship space first.
Now, thank you for that. And that's what we highlight, right? I talk about this consistently when I promote Black Love Dialogues, the idea that if we're trying to get a certain job, we'll go get the degree, if we're, or we'll go get the certification. But I've asked people in the mental dialogue community live in the coffee shop, what's one of the most important decisions you will ever make? And everybody will agree, the person you marry and have children with, right? And we actually try to do it by trial and error. And so it's a mistake, even if I haven't had a traumatic situation, but I want to highlight what you just talked about. If you are watching this and you've experienced trauma, stop trying to pair bond without a Fila Antwine in your life, without a therapist in your life. If you've had that, please get that help to try to pair bond. Now, let's move it to where the conversation went a little bit, and then we'll get out of here. So it also moved to those who know about people having traumatic situations, right? Or like you said, on the internet, those things are highlighted. Very traumatic, very toxic situations are all over the internet. So therefore, a lot of our sisters are saying no based on what they're seeing. It's not their own experience, right? And so when we played the cut, it led some people to say, yeah, well, we got to teach the boys to say no too, right? Like they were saying that. And I'm like, not disagreeing. Like I already mentioned, we do need to learn how to value ourselves and not just give our bodies away too. However, there is a difference And when the conversation resorts to let's tell the boys no too, I feel like we do our women a disservice. When that we take the clip that we played and people say that, we're doing our sisters a disservice. Now back to the women who haven't had the specific traumatic situation. Maybe some men hit on them and was rude to them and that type of stuff. So they've had those experiences, but they haven't been through a sexual assault. They haven't had that. But yet they're fearful because, hey, men should know to say no too. Like I'm just saying that whole dynamic is being put out there, and there is a difference. There is a difference on the man who naturally pursues, naturally. I mean, I know that's changed a lot now with the swipe left and swipe right. I get what we call them the incels now that don't approach. So I know more of that exists now. So
yes.
women, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying every man is pursuing, but I'm just saying let's get to the natural part of it. So in the natural pursuit, that some of those initial no's that she's talked about will serve you well. It will serve you well. But here's the other part, because again, I don't want to be devoid of protecting women. I don't want to be devoid of that. But I had this comment I put on my IG page years ago where I says, if I ever had a daughter, I would teach her not to go drinking with the boys. I said I would teach her not to go drinking with the boys. And I want to see what the comments were. No surprise. Well, what about teaching the boys? Same situation, whatever. And I says, here's what you don't get. To protect my daughter, I know she's going to, if she goes to college per se, right? If she goes to college, she's going to run into a whole bunch of boys, and there's boys she could go drinking with that would never do anything to her. But as her father, I needed to keep away from that one or two over that 4-year period that's in that room, and they both drinking. And I'm talking about she went out with the boys drinking, and then I needed, because I'm gonna go hurt that dude. So the comment is for the couple of dudes who will go there. It ain't I'm not worried about the majority of the boys at her school. As her father, the protection is, the guidance is for the one-offs. And the reason I say one-offs, because here's the reality of having a traumatic experience. You know, we know of women who've had a couple of situations where they went through life and even more than once has happened to them. Rare, but it goes that far. Here's the thing, like we just talked about, if you've had a traumatic experience, that's your lens from now on. It doesn't matter that in your lifetime you'll run across and meet another 5,000 men. So I'm kind of walking through this conversation that is, we can't just simplify it to make sure the boys say no too, because the majority of men are not going to harm. That's the reality that will help you. If you understand that, from my opinion, if you understand that as a woman, you get better at how to say yes, because you're not operating just out of fear because of what the internet and what society culture teaches and trying to equalize. Well, teach men to say no too. I'm talking about reality. Jump in here.
I have a 13-year-old daughter also, right? And so I teach her the same thing I teach my clients, which I live in my real life. And that is that you are your first responsibility.
Absolutely.
We are going to do everything in our power to keep you safe, to protect you, to provide for you, all of that as mom and dad and family. But you have a responsibility to think for yourself, to take care of yourself, and to only consciously put yourself in situations that you believe are for your benefit, right? You cannot entrust yourself to anyone, especially in adolescence and in childhood. And I tell her often, I said, you may have a relationship with a young man and he may be the greatest guy when the two of you are together. That's actually who he is when the two of you are together. But when he's with his friends or he's with his boys, there's a different aspect of him that you'll never get to see. And at certain ages, biology, chemistry determine and dictate what young men and boys do. And so I always tell my girls and my women to be mindful and to be okay when men let you down or disappoint you, because they're just being human. we sometimes have these almost superhuman expectations of men. And when men show up as just flawed humans, we're shocked and we have all this judgment. No, he's just a man being a human. He's just a boy being a human. And so it is important for young girls to be empowered and to understand that I'm not a damsel in distress. I can take care of myself. I can make choices for my own benefit. And then when you are out with the guys and you're hanging with them, you get to be in connection with them, but you also get to be aware of yourself, your own actions, the environment. That is a responsibility that every individual has. And for young girls in particular in this space, I think that there's been a disservice done. And when we were on the podcast, I think one of the guests spoke to this as well, you know, the right that women have to pleasure also, and how, you know, we shouldn't care about what other people think about us. We should just be able to go and do, and that's fine. But there are consequences to everything. And if we're being realistic as women, our bodies are not designed to battle men physically, right? To be able to say yes to something and potentially put yourself in a harmful space. And so it's not about what other people say about you or how other people judge you, but it is about having that self-discipline, recognizing that you have to be responsible for yourself as a woman, Montoya, and also understanding that there is a consequence to every single yes, which is why your no's have to be valuable and have to be intentional.
And they can be valuable when you know to use them properly. And one of the best ways to use them, especially for our younger sisters, is some of what JP and his wife were saying. It's understanding, one, like we talked about at the very beginning, the sensuality of just creating the no, so that he has to know something else about you to get to spend time with you, just to get the knowing process. So this is not just about the sexual part, but it's an advantage of just not being easy access. I just already told you about a young man saying he don't know if he'll ever get married because access is so easy. He don't know what to believe. So though this is the world that y'all, culture that y'all are being grown up in, and I'm saying, hey, let me wake y'all up to effectively using no. So one, that you can stand out, and then you start getting the men who are self-disciplined themselves, because they're going to be intrigued. Because I promise you, you don't want the man who loudly says, oh, whatever she won't do, someone else will. That's the red flag you need. I don't care how attractive he is. I don't care how much money he has in his pocket. If he says that, boom, say no to him. Like instead of saying I like him, I'm attracted, and all the way, because I get it's very again, we talk about the natural part. The men that a lot of women like, y'all are attracted to him too. I get it. But move to the guy who doesn't say that, who actually will pursue you after a no. Because the one that just moves on while you say no, let him do just that. Let him do just that. You know, one other thing I'll say again, because we're having this conversation, they always say, you know, when it comes to pregnancy, for example, because I know Jordan Peterson mentioned that, and they were just like, you know, everybody goes, it takes two. And I always say it takes one to say no. And I say that, and people, I've said it to people on my show, and the dialogue again is assuming that I'm putting the onus on the woman. I don't care if it's the boy or the girl. I said if I had a son, I would teach him that same thing too. Like you're teaching your daughter, you are responsible. My mother taught me that. It's how I came home with no children, based on her beating that in my head.
And I teach my son that as well.
Absolutely.
Listen, I tell him use a condom and pull out with the condom on.
That was me. That was me. So yes, but it's still, you can't just simply reduce it to teach the boys too. Even though we're both saying, yes, if I had a son, that's my mama taught me, that's what I would teach. You're actually teaching your son exactly what I would teach. But the reality is, and it's not I'm repeating this on purpose because we're avoiding the consequence is different for her as the young lady.
Absolutely it is.
That plays out. The weight of that is different, but I'm not just pushing on the negative end of it. I'm saying the positive end to saying no is you weed through us during our adolescence. And unfortunately, in today's time, I've talked about this plenty of times before, we don't have a society that pushes us to go ahead and get into our father and family mode too. So y'all are not only working alongside of us as women as quote unquote equals for so long that a lot of things get mixed up, and the past generation didn't have to worry about this. They were already married. But now that you're working alongside and equal in these places, you're gonna have to find your nose.
Yeah.
To as we mature and get serious and want to look for a family too, there is a true respect for the sisters who have said no more.
Absolutely. And saying no really creates more options for you. It opens up more opportunities for yes. It's such a powerful thing. And I'm really blessed and grateful that I learned it at a young age. My mother has 11 siblings. And so I always observed the women in my family and how they moved in the relationship dynamics. And on a personal note, Montoya, I remember being about 14 or 15, and I was like the last virgin in the group in the neighborhood. And the boys in the neighborhood used to come to try to convince me to let them have it. Right? Here's why. Here's what I'm willing to do. Here's what. And I was like, oh, there's something to this. They're working hard. They would ride their bikes over to my grandmother's house and knock on the door and have their conversations and plead their case. And I never said yes to any of those young men. And we still have respectful relationships as adults now.
Absolutely. And JP's wife was talking about that. She was saying that when she taught her daughter, she was to say even 16-year-olds were conforming. So again, remember I said at the very beginning of this, the power of it.
Yes.
The power of it. And that's not being taught as much. I know there are parents teaching it, but I'm just saying culturally, everything in the culture actually pushes you away from it. And so again, we wanted to talk about how to say no. And I think we've done a good job of it from my perspective. If there's anything you feel like we left out or anything you want to close out with, please do let them know how they can get to your services. And then I'll let them know how to follow us on the IG page and keep up with anytime we're doing the Black Love Dialogue. But let them know how to get in touch with you, Queen.
So they can follow me on all social platforms at She Is Fila, SHEISFILA. My website is filaantwine.com. But I just want to end by saying that there is such power in knowing how to use no as a resource. And it's easy to say yes to everything. It's easy to give in, right? You build a level of self-worth and self-confidence and self-value when you learn how to intentionally say no to the things that are not going to benefit you. And it's not just about getting a man, but life listens to this as well. So all of the opportunities in your life change and shift. And a woman who is able to value herself is one of the most powerful creatures in the world.
Period. Point blank. Follow us on Instagram at Black Love Dialogue, or follow us on this YouTube page because we'll always do some promotions. But the fourth Sundays of the month, we're going to be doing the Black Love Dialogue and Wine, a private podcast experience, only $25. We'll have the tickets available about 2 weeks out. But if you follow on Black Love Dialogue, you'll see the promotions. Thank you, Fila, for a great conversation. I think it was a very necessary conversation, just to deep dive to help people understand this thing we call pair bonding. And again, this Black Love Dialogue is for those serious about love, marriage, and legacy. All right, Queen, thank you.
Always a pleasure. See you soon.
All right, later.